The engagement party at Rosewood Manor was everything my sister Megan had dreamed of. Crystal chandeliers, casting warm light over elegantly dressed guests, servers circulating with champagne and canapes. Live piano music drifting across the perfectly manicured gardens, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The venue was undeniably stunning, which made it the perfect backdrop for Megan to demonstrate exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. "Emma, there you are." Megan's voice carried that particular tone of forced enthusiasm she used when she wanted witnesses to her generosity. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Come meet Derek's groomsmen properly." I followed her across the marble-floored reception room, past clusters of well-dressed guests holding crystal glasses and making the kind of polished small talk that comes naturally to people who've never worried about money. Megan looked radiant in her designer cocktail dress, her engagement ring catching the light as she gestured expressively, clearly in her element as the center of attention. "Everyone, this is my sister, Emma," she announced to a group of impeccably groomed men in expensive suits. "Emma, these are Derek's college friends, all very successful, very eligible bachelors." She laughed prettily. Well, most of them anyway. The introductions were politely awkward, with Megan helpfully providing commentary about everyone's careers and accomplishments. There was Brad, the investment banker, Marcus, the surgeon, James, the tech entrepreneur, and several others whose impressive credentials Megan rattled off with obvious pride. "And Emma works in, what is it again?" Something with computers." "Software development," I said quietly. "Right. Software development. Very technical, very practical." The way she said practical made it sound like she meant pedestrian. Emma's always been the studious one in the family, very focused on her work. Brad nodded politely. "What kind of software do you work on?" "Mostly back-end systems for hospitality management, database architecture, booking systems, that sort of thing." "Oh, how interesting," Marcus said, with the kind of polite disinterest reserved for conversations about other people's less glamorous jobs. Megan beamed, as if I'd just confirmed something important. "See, very technical." Emma's always been good with those detail-oriented things that would drive me crazy. I'm more of a big-picture person myself. She linked her arm through Derek's as he joined our group, her fiancé looking every inch the successful marketing executive in his perfectly tailored suit. "Derek, honey, I was just introducing Emma to your friends. Tell them about the wedding planning." Emma's been so helpful with all the practical details. Derek smiled warmly, though I caught the slight glance he exchanged with Megan. Emma's been incredible, really on top of all the logistics and vendor coordination, very organized. "It's what she's good at," Megan said fondly. "All those computer skills translate well to spreadsheets and schedules." Emma made the most detailed seating chart I've ever seen. The group chuckled appreciatively, and I realized I was being positioned as the helpful sister who handled the boring details, while Megan focused on the glamorous aspects of wedding planning. It wasn't entirely inaccurate. I had helped with vendor coordination and timeline management, but the way she framed it made it sound like I was some kind of glorified wedding assistant. Speaking of the seating chart, Megan continued brightly, "Emma, I wanted to let you know I made a small change. I moved you to table 12 instead of table 8. Table 8 was where the immediate family and wedding party were seated. Table 12 was considerably further from the head table." "Is there a problem with table 8? I asked. "Oh no, not at all. It's just that table 12 is going to be so perfect for you. I seated you with Derek's cousin, who's also in tech, and a few other people who I think you'll really connect with. Very smart, very practical people." Her bridesmaids had materialized beside her, Sophia, Jessica, and Chloe, all looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine in their coordinated designer outfits. They exchanged knowing glances that suggested they'd been part of this seating chart discussion. "It's actually better than the family table," Sophia added helpfully. "Less pressure to make small talk with all the relatives asking about your love life and career plans." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "And you won't have to sit through all those boring speeches about childhood memories and embarrassing stories. Plus, table 12 is closer to the bar," Chloe pointed out with a laugh. "Always a strategic advantage." Megan looked pleased with this support from her bridesmaids. See, it's really much more comfortable for you. Table 8 is going to be all Derek's business associates and my sorority sisters, very social, very intense conversation. Table 12 will be much more relaxed. I understood perfectly. Table 12 was where they put the family members who didn't quite fit with the important guests, the ones who might not know how to make appropriate conversation or might feel uncomfortable in such elevated social company. That sounds thoughtful, I said calmly. I knew you'd understand. Megan beamed. You've always been so practical about these things, never one to make a fuss about protocol or positioning. Derek's groomsmen looked mildly uncomfortable with the conversation, but none of them seemed inclined to comment on the family dynamics playing out in front of them. The musicians shifted to a new piece, and several couples moved toward the small dance floor area. Oh, and Emma, one more tiny thing, Megan continued, her voice taking on that carefully casual tone that usually preceded something I wouldn't like. I know we discussed you giving a speech at the rehearsal dinner, but I've been thinking about the timeline, and it might be better to keep the speeches to just the immediate wedding party and parents, to keep things moving smoothly. Sophia nodded supportively. Rehearsal dinner speeches can drag on forever if you're not careful. Better to keep it tight and focused. Exactly, Megan agreed. And honestly, public speaking isn't really your thing anyway, is it, Em? You've always been more comfortable behind the scenes, making sure everything runs smoothly. That's your strength. I felt something settle in my chest, not hurt exactly, but a kind of resigned understanding of how this evening was going to play out. I was being systematically repositioned from sister to helpful background figure, from family member to logistics coordinator. That makes sense, I said evenly. Perfect. I knew you'd be understanding about it. Megan squeezed my arm affectionately. You're the best. And really, I don't know what I'd do without you handling all the practical stuff. The conversation moved on to other topics: honeymoon plans, wedding dress details, reception timeline. I listened politely, occasionally asked questions, played the role of the supportive sister who was grateful to be included, even in a diminished capacity. The venue is just incredible, Jessica was saying, gesturing around the opulent reception room. Megan, how did you even find this place? Oh my God, it was such a process, Megan replied, clearly delighted to tell the story. We looked at probably 20 different venues. Most of them were either too small, too tacky, or just didn't have the right feeling. But the moment we walked into Rosewood Manor, we both knew it was perfect. It must have cost a fortune, Brad commented, looking around appreciatively at the crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Derek laughed. Let's just say it's a good thing the marketing business has been going well. This place definitely doesn't come cheap, but it's worth every penny, Megan added quickly. This is once in a lifetime, We wanted something that would be absolutely perfect, something that would make a statement about who we are as a couple. Chloe nodded approvingly. It definitely makes a statement. Very elegant, very sophisticated, very exclusive. Exactly. Megan's eyes lit up. That's what drew us to it. Rosewood Manor only hosts about 30 events per year. They're very selective about their clientele. You can't just book this place. They have to approve you first, like a country club application process. Marcus asked with interest, sort of. Sort of, Derek explained. They want to make sure their events maintain a certain standard, the right kind of people, the right kind of celebration. It's not for everyone, but that's what makes it special. I felt several pairs of eyes glance in my direction, and I understood the subtext perfectly. Rosewood Manor was the kind of place where people like Derek and Megan belonged. Successful, sophisticated, socially connected. It wasn't the kind of place where people like me, with our practical jobs and modest lifestyles, would typically find ourselves. The waiting list is usually 2 years, Sophia added. But somehow Megan managed to get a date just 8 months out. We got incredibly lucky, Megan said modestly. There was a last-minute cancellation, and the venue coordinator remembered us from our initial consultation. She called to offer us the date, and we jumped on it immediately. Good thing you could afford to jump on it, James commented with a grin. I looked into venues like this for my sister's wedding. The deposits alone are more than most people's annual salaries. It's definitely an investment, Derek acknowledged. But like Megan said, This is once in a lifetime. We didn't want to compromise on our dream wedding just to save money. The conversation continued in this vein, with various guests sharing stories about expensive weddings they'd attended, exclusive venues they'd heard about, the importance of sparing no expense for such a significant life event. I contributed appropriately, asking interested questions and making supportive comments, while internally calculating exactly how much this evening was costing and wondering how Derek and Megan were actually financing it. Emma's wedding will probably be much more intimate, Megan said at one point, the word intimate clearly being diplomatic language for small and modest. She's always preferred quieter celebrations anyway. Nothing wrong with a budget-conscious approach, Sophia added helpfully. Lots of people have beautiful weddings without going overboard. Absolutely, Chloe agreed. You can do amazing things with creativity and careful planning, very Pinterest-worthy on a smaller scale. I realized they were all trying to be encouraging about my theoretical future wedding being significantly less elaborate than what we were currently experiencing. They meant well, but their assumptions about what I could afford and what kind of celebration would be appropriate for someone like me were becoming increasingly clear. The important thing is finding someone who appreciates you for who you are, Jessica added warmly. Someone who doesn't need all the bells and whistles to be happy. Right, Megan agreed. Emma's always been more about substance than style anyway, very grounded, very authentic. Again, the way she said authentic made it sound like a polite way of saying unsophisticated. And honestly, Derek added, not everyone needs this level of celebration. This works for us because we're both pretty social. We have large networks. We enjoy entertaining, but I can see how someone more private might prefer something completely different. The group nodded thoughtfully, as if they were all imagining my eventual modest wedding in a community center or public park, with homemade decorations and a small guest list of equally practical, down-to-earth people. Well, I think it's wonderful when people know their limitations and plan accordingly, Marcus said diplomatically. Much better than trying to keep up appearances and going into debt for one day. Exactly, Megan exclaimed. Emma has always been so sensible about money, never one to overspend or try to impress people, very responsible. I smiled and nodded, accepting their collective assessment of my character and my future prospects. Around us, the party continued, servers refilling champagne glasses, guests mingling and laughing, the live piano creating an elegant soundtrack to the evening's festivities. I should probably go check on something, I said finally, excusing myself from the group. Of course, Megan said brightly. Thanks for being so understanding about everything, Em. You're the best. I made my way across the reception room, past the elaborate floral arrangements and gleaming surfaces, toward the restroom area. The venue was even more impressive from this angle. Soaring ceilings, original artwork, handcrafted architectural details that spoke of serious money and refined taste. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another. Then it started ringing. Emma Chin speaking. Miss Chin, this is Catherine Williams from Rosewood Manor Events Coordination. I'm terribly sorry to bother you this evening, but we have an urgent situation with the Hartwell wedding scheduled for next Saturday. The bride's family has requested some significant modifications to their contract. They want to extend the reception by 3 hours and add a second bar service, but they're also asking us to waive the additional fees. It would set a concerning precedent for our other clients. I glanced back toward the party, where Megan was holding court with her bridesmaids and Derek's groomsmen, everyone laughing at something she just said. What's the total additional cost they're trying to avoid? Approximately $18,000 for the extended hours, bar service, and additional staffing. They're claiming we should absorb the costs as a courtesy, since they're such valued clients. Have we had problems with the Hartwells before? This is actually the third time they've requested contract modifications without payment adjustments. Our staff is concerned about setting expectations that will continually accommodate requests without appropriate compensation. I agree. Deny the modification request unless they're willing to pay the full additional fees. If they have a problem with that, they're welcome to find a different venue for next Saturday. Thank you, Miss Chin. I'll communicate that to them immediately. Oh, and the Miller wedding coordinator called about their December booking. They want to confirm the wine selection for their tasting next week. Have Susan handle that. She knows their preferences better than I do. Perfect. Sorry again for interrupting your evening. I hung up and turned to find Megan standing behind me, having apparently followed me away from the party. Who was that? She asked curiously. It sounded very official. Work, I said simply. On a Saturday night at my engagement party? She looked genuinely confused. What kind of software development emergency requires you to work weekends? Before I could answer, a woman in an elegant business suit approached us, looking somewhat flustered. Excuse me, she said politely. I'm looking for Emma Chin. I was told she might be in this area. That's me, I said. Miss Chin, I'm Catherine Williams, the events coordinator we just spoke with on the phone. I wanted to follow up in person about the Hartwell situation and also to personally apologize for the interruption. I know how much you value your privacy during personal events. Megan was staring at both of us with growing confusion. It's fine, Catherine. You made the right decision calling me directly rather than trying to handle it yourself. The Hartwells have been testing boundaries for months. I agree completely. I'll make it clear that the additional fees are non-negotiable. Catherine paused, glancing at Megan. I hope you're enjoying your sister's engagement party. The event is going beautifully. Wait, Megan interrupted, looking between Catherine and me. How do you two know each other? Why is the venue coordinator calling Emma directly? Catherine looked surprised by the question, then glanced at me uncertainly. Should I? She began. It's fine, I said calmly. Megan, Catherine is the events coordinator for Rosewood Manor. We work together regularly on various matters. Work together? How? Megan pressed. You said you do software development. What does that have to do with wedding venues? Catherine's expression shifted to something like confusion, mixed with discomfort. I'm sorry, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Miss Chin doesn't work in software development. She owns Rosewood Manor. The color drained from Megan's face. She what? Miss Chin purchased the property 3 years ago, Catherine continued, apparently unaware of the bombshell she was dropping. She's been instrumental in elevating our service standards and expanding our event offerings. We wouldn't be half as successful without her vision and investment. Megan's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. I should get back to the party, I said gently. Catherine, thank you for handling the Hartwell situation so professionally. I'll review the Miller wine selections on Monday. Of course, Miss Chin. And again, my apologies for the interruption. Catherine walked away, leaving Megan and me standing in the marble-floored hallway, the sounds of the engagement party drifting from the reception room. You own this place, Megan whispered. I own this place. But you said you do software development. I do software development for hospitality management systems. Specifically, I develop and maintain the booking and event management software for all my properties. All your properties? Rosewood Manor, the Grandview Hotel, Lakeside Conference Center, the Metropolitan Event Space, and about a dozen smaller venues throughout the region. Megan leaned against the wall, looking like she might need the support. This is impossible, she said weakly. It's really not. You never asked what I actually do for work, Megan. You decided I was some kind of low-level tech worker and never bothered to get any details. But you live in that small apartment. You drive that old Honda. You dress like... She gestured vaguely at my simple black dress. I live in a perfectly nice apartment that's close to my office. I drive a reliable car that's paid for, and I dress appropriately for someone who spends half her time visiting construction sites and meeting with contractors. I paused. Also, none of those things have anything to do with how much money I make or what I own. How much? She began, then stopped herself. How much what? How much money do I make? How much are my properties worth? How much did your engagement party cost me to host? Megan's eyes widened. Cost you? Megan, you booked this venue 8 months ago with a last-minute cancellation story. There was no cancellation. I held the date for you the moment you mentioned you were engaged. You've been planning your dream wedding at my venue with my staff, using my resources. But we paid the deposit. We signed a contract. You signed a contract for exactly half the actual cost of an event this size. I've been covering the difference. Megan slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her designer dress pooling around her. Why didn't you tell me? When When you decided I was the practical sister who handles logistics. When you moved me to table 12 because I wouldn't fit in with your important guests. When you canceled my speech because public speaking isn't my thing. When you assumed I'd have a small, budget wedding because I'm so sensible about money. I sat down on a nearby bench, looking at my sister, who was having what appeared to be a complete mental breakdown on the marble floor of the venue she hadn't known I owned. For 3 years, you've treated me like the family member you have to invite but don't particularly want around. You've made assumptions about my life, my success, my worth, without ever actually asking about any of it. But I didn't know, she protested weakly. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I kept my voice gentle but firm. You decided who you thought I was and never bothered to find out if you were right. What about Derek? Does he know? Derek knows exactly who I am and what I do. He's been incredibly professional and respectful about the whole situation. He even tried to pay full price for the venue, but I insisted on giving you the family discount. Family discount. She repeated hollowly, 50% off. Plus, I covered all the upgrade costs for the premium flowers, the expanded bar service, and the live music. Your dream wedding is costing about $47,000. You've paid $12,000. Megan buried her face in her hands. Oh God. Oh God. What have I done? You've planned a beautiful engagement party and what I'm sure will be a lovely wedding. You've also spent several years making it clear that you consider me an embarrassment to the family, who needs to know her place and accept her limitations. I never said that. You seated me at table 12, Megan, with people like me who would be more comfortable away from your important guests. You canceled my speech because public speaking isn't my thing. You've spent this entire evening talking about how practical and sensible and grounded I am, as if those were polite ways to say I'm boring and unsuccessful. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. What happens now? What do you mean? I mean, are you going to cancel the wedding? Are you going to make us pay the full amount? Are you going to kick us out? I considered the question seriously, watching my sister sitting on the floor of my venue, finally understanding that the family dynamic she'd constructed was based on completely false assumptions. I'm going to do what I've been doing for the past 8 months, I said finally. I'm going to make sure you have a beautiful wedding at a price you can afford, because you're my sister, and I love you, even after everything. Megan started crying harder. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so incredibly sorry. I thought. I assumed. I was so wrong about everything. Yes, you were. Can you forgive me? I can. But things are going to have to change, Megan. You can't treat people like they're worth less than you based on assumptions and superficial judgments. You can't decide someone's value based on what car they drive or where you think they should sit at your wedding. I know. I know you're absolutely right. And you're going to have to deal with the fact that table 12 is actually the best table in the house, I added with a slight smile. Perfect view of the gardens, closest to the dance floor and yes, strategically located near the bar. I specifically requested that seating arrangement. She looked up at me with surprise. You wanted table 12? I wanted to sit with Derek's cousin Marcus. He's actually a brilliant software architect, and we've had some fascinating conversations about database optimization, much more interesting than listening to your sorority sisters discuss their skincare routines. Despite everything, Megan laughed. You're not upset about the seating chart? I'm not upset about the seating chart. I'm upset about the assumptions behind the seating chart. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes carefully to preserve what was left of her makeup. What do I tell people about you? I mean, about all this. You tell them the truth, that your sister owns the venue, and you're grateful she wanted to host your wedding. What about Derek's friends? They think you're some kind of low-level tech worker. Derek's friends can think whatever they want. The ones worth knowing will adjust their assumptions. The ones who can't get past their preconceptions about what success looks like probably weren't worth impressing anyway. Megan struggled to stand up in her cocktail dress, and I offered her a hand. Are you ready to go back to your party? I asked. Are you ready to be introduced properly? I smiled. I've been ready for that for 3 years, Megan. The question is whether you're ready to have a sister who doesn't fit into the neat little box you built for her. She took a deep breath, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in one of the ornate mirrors lining the hallway. I'm ready, she said. And Emma, thank you for everything. For the venue, for the discount, for not canceling my wedding when you had every right to, for being so much better than I deserved. You're my sister, I said simply. This is what family does for each other. We walked back toward the reception room together, toward the party full of people who were about to learn that sometimes the most successful person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it to anyone. Behind us, Catherine was handling the evening's logistics with her usual professionalism, ensuring that my sister's engagement party continued flawlessly at my venue, supported by my staff, covered by my money. Just another Saturday night in the hospitality business, with the added complexity of family dynamics and a long overdue conversation about assumptions, respect, and what it really means to know your place in the world.